of what we'll do. I'll try to wrap it up by noon, but I hope you can make it and stick around. I just thought I'd let everybody know what you're going to do, and there'll be both stuff for new people and also some advanced stuff. So we will see you tomorrow morning. Thank you. Thanks, Ron.
Great, thanks, John. We look forward to your class. And gentlemen, folks, there is not a better expert in the world on cold core events than John Davies is. Thank you, John. Okay, folks, we are about to have some fun here, and it is our pleasure to welcome you folks to the Storm Chaser Convention, to our annual Chasercon. And Mike Smith, who is our keynote speaker tonight, is actually going to moderate our panel discussion. And we'll start with Mike introducing everybody and go from there. And if you all have any questions, we will definitely be taking questions from anybody in the audience. Okay, Mike, it's all yours.
Thank you, Roger. Good afternoon, everyone. It seems, I'm sorry. It's... Well, we're off to a rolling start. It seems that storm chasers and law enforcement are natural enemies. Well, we're going to stop that today. You're going to find that if you get pulled over, the worst possible time to ask a hard question of a law enforcement officer is when you're pulled over. The right time is today. So what we're going to do is have a, I hope, very constructive, helpful conversation between the storm chasing community, between the storm tourism companies, and law enforcement represented locally and from 2 states. And the whole purpose of this is to answer your questions. I have a whole list of questions if you don't have any. And we're going to take this opportunity to make storm chasing even better for all concerned, to make sure that the right information gets to where it needs to be, and that the friction that has sometimes existed in the past between law enforcement and storm chasers goes away. Now, to my immediate right is Dr. Reed Timmer of AccuWeather. Reed is a friend of mine from a long time, and Reed is the only guy to come within 2 inches of running over my toe south of Pratt in 2012. You missed, guy. But Reed draws some attention because he runs the Dominator, which is a heavily armored vehicle that is designed to penetrate tornadoes. And so because of his high visibility, I invited him to be here today so he can talk about some of his experiences, and hopefully we air all of this and everybody comes away with more knowledge. Sitting next to him is Richard Powell, the Undersheriff of Sedgwick County. Next to him, Chad Crittenden, Technical Trooper of the Kansas Highway Patrol. Then we have Carrie Corthouse, the Emergency Manager of Butler County, which is the county immediately east of Wichita and a rural county. And then finally, last but not least, Major Pat Mays of the Oklahoma Highway Patrol. I wanted to have both Kansas and Oklahoma represented for the simple reason that we're probably the 2 biggest chasing states. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, would any of you like to say anything before we start the questions and answers? Yes, okay, microphone, please. Why don't we start here at the end, if that's all right? Or Reed, did you want to say something to start?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I've always said that if you're speeding, it means that you've done something wrong. It usually means you left too late in the morning or you made a missed forecast as well. So I think sometimes if you're out of position, it's always best just to not speed, go the speed limit, and accept the consequences of what happens. But I'd be lying if I said that I haven't sped a few times here and there, and also. But I've always had a great relationship with law enforcement, and we were talking a little bit before about Trooper Ben on Twitter. Also, we talk a lot, and he even jokes around with me quite a bit, saying, when there's a target area in northern Kansas, just to make sure you're safe and don't speed as well. And But I think it's important to be safe out there, because then you can live and chase another storm. That's what we want to do, is chase as many storms as possible, and more importantly, report as many storms as possible to keep people safe in the path of these storms. And I know storm chasers have always had a strong desire to work with emergency personnel and law enforcement out there, not only during the chase, but immediately afterward, in terms of first responders as well. And I saw the earlier talk on first aid, and I think it's important for all of us to be trained in first aid in case we do come across the dark side that we always often do when we're storm chasing. But this is great that law enforcement has been invited here, the true heroes in the whole storm response process here, along with other emergency personnel as well. So thank you.
Well, on behalf of, first off, my boss, who's Sheriff Jeff Easter, we appreciate the fact that all of you are here. Our 550 employees within the Sheriff's Office truly do realize the value of you folks. You know, you are more sets of eyes, more sets of ears, and we clearly understand that all of you have your own particular missions, goals, and areas of expertise. And the fact that there are far more people here, as I understand it, than originally were expected.
Yes, we've had an overflow crowd, which we're very happy about.
Right, that just clearly shows the passion and interest in the level of professionalism that this group brings to Wichita, Kansas. So we would like to, again, applaud you for being here, for taking advantage of the various seminars and training that's going on, and the sharing and networking that's going to take place. So it's a pleasure on my part to meet all of you. Thank you.
Well, I'm Chad. Thanks for having me out here today. And a lot of things that we do out here, not only stopping cars, investigating crashes, is we go out and we try to spot storms too. Now, obviously, we don't have near the training that a lot of you guys in this room do. So we rely on a lot of the information that's coming off the news, that's coming off the radio, and a lot of the amateur radio, especially when we're out in the rural parts of the state. Here in the metropolitan area where I'm stationed at, we got a lot of information coming in, but there's a lot of our counties and districts across the state where there's one trooper per 6 or 7 counties, and they're trying to, do the best that they can with what they've got. And it's pretty difficult out there sometimes when you're only 1 or 2 officers in one county out there trying to go through and deal with the tornadoes, with the hail, all these different things that are happening. And we want to ensure that not only the public's safe, but when you guys are out on our roadways chasing, that you guys are safe, because a lot of times we all get so excited and you guys are out tracking the storms and we get distracted. Not only does law enforcement have to watch out for everybody, we don't want you guys getting hit, because that is so dangerous when we get out on the sides of the road or even on the shoulder sometimes, that motorists, they aren't paying attention to you guys along with us on the sides of the road or as you guys are driving down the roadway. So whatever lines of communication you guys want to ask us to make things safer for not only us, the public, and you guys, please ask us today.
Well, I would like to say as an emergency manager that, no offense, but I'd kind of like to not see you in my county, because if you find my county interesting, that usually means we're going to have a bad weather day. And as amazing as weather is, I always prefer that somebody else host it and then we can go and help them with their problems. But I do have to say, if you're not familiar with the counties in Kansas, my county, which as Mike mentioned is directly east of here, happens to be geographically the largest county in Kansas. We have over 1,400 square miles we're trying to cover. So I have to say, any extra eyes on a storm is something that we value immensely. So I am excited to see so many people in this area that are interested in our weather.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll tell you, I was telling Chad when I got here this morning or this afternoon that when I crossed the Oklahoma-Kansas line, the roads went from black to white. So evidently you guys have more money for salt than we do. Let me just say this. Just before the break, I don't know who was talking, but we were outside in the hallway, and I heard 2 words that really epitomize how we feel. And the 2 words were, we're going to have a public safety panel. Public safety, that's really what we do. That's why we're here, and I'll be honest with you, that's why we got in law enforcement. So really, we are interested in your safety. We're interested in our safety and everybody out there. So I'm really excited to be here, and I just want to say thank you for that.
Thank you, everyone. All right, from the audience. Because these are state laws, I would like to have Pat and Chad comment on light bars. That seems to be a controversy among some members of the storm chase community. Do you believe they are good in the sense that they raise visibility, or do you think they are a distraction? And is there anything we need to know with regard to the laws governing that, the use of a light bar by a storm chaser?
Chad? Well, let's just say this. There's a couple things I can say. First off, you know, flashing lights used to really be a good thing. I was telling Chad just before we got in here that Oklahoma had recently changed the law, and many states have, to where they allow construction vehicles, certain construction vehicles, wreckers, and a few others to have flashing blue and red lights. We were opposed to that, and I'll tell you why. It used to be that if someone entered a construction zone and they saw red and blue lights, what did they do? They slowed down, right? Well, they become desensitized to that because they know now that these other vehicles have it, so even if we're in the construction zone, they're not even slowing down. So folks have really become desensitized, so that's a concern for us. As far as flashing amber lights, I can tell you in Oklahoma that there are specific laws about lighting equipment, and I can tell you that there are specific laws even for amber lights. And I will tell you that a storm chaser or spotter or something like that doesn't qualify under the law. Now, to be honest with you, if it's raining and you guys are out there and we're worried about storms, the last thing we're worried about are those yellow lights. As far as visibility, I'll tell you the same thing. I think that the general public has become desensitized to lights, so I think in a lot of cases they're more distracting than they are a help. And I'll leave it at that for now and answer any questions that come up, and I'll let Chad weigh in.
Okay. Chad, can you weigh in from a Kansas point of view?
Yep. Same. We're very similar to that now. Tow trucks here in the state of Kansas. Some other vehicles can't have red and blues the same as in Oklahoma. Now, our maintenance vehicles, such as KDOT and even wreckers, can still have the amber lights. Our motor assist technician vehicles that work for us here in the metropolitan areas of Wichita, Salina, Kansas City, and Topeka, they run amber lights and white lights on their pickups too out there on the side of the road. Now, we all know with the technology of LED out here, it's just extremely bright. I mean, I see a lot of different law enforcement agencies and different things that have such bright lights. I mean, it almost causes you to go into a seizure. I mean, and lights are good. We want to warn the public. Sometimes we don't have enough lighting. Sometimes we have way too much, if you ask me. The things is they're distracting. They do draw your attention. Now, when it's inclement weather out and it's, you know, blowing 40 miles an hour with sideways rain and everything else, and your wipers are on full blast, it's hard for me even to tell. Looking in my rearview mirror, is that an ambulance? Is that amber lights? You can't even tell what color of lights are coming. And sometimes if people are trying to yield for, let's say, a chaser or KDOT or whatever it may be and go to the shoulder of the roadway, they're really not required to. They're required to yield for emergency vehicles, which is the red and blue, and we don't want to be putting cars on the shoulder as we're driving down the roadway. Now, if we're stopped on the side of the road, if you guys are out on the side in a drive somewhere safe, and you turn your lights on to, you know, warn the public that you're there, I think that's a little bit different because people aren't going to be having to slow down and pull over thinking that you are an emergency vehicle driving down the roadway. But it gives people the idea that, yes, there's someone on the side of the road, no different than amber flasher, four-way flashers would be if somebody stalled on the roadway. That I wouldn't mind to do that just because I think it eliminates some of the confusion out there, and we don't want people pulling over, especially if we're on two-lane highways where there's a little bit of gravel or none, and the next thing they know, they're pulling off, getting stuck down in the ditch, and we're like, here comes the storm, and we just keep going, right? Now, we're, as law enforcement officers, are going out there and trying to get these people out, and it just kind of gets dangerous all the way around. It's some of your opinions. You guys asked me, what do you want to know? What's your opinions? I mean, do you like light bars? Do you not? Go ahead, sir.
excuse if someone has those flashing lights that they think, oh, well, I also can speed past a bunch of stuff because I'm showing it I'm on a mission. You all need to move on over so I can get there. And that, to me, that I agree. I think that goes against the idea of separating law enforcement and safety from storm chasing. And so I agree. I'm glad to hear that it's part of the law.
Is there anyone who's pro-light bar who would like to say something?
Go ahead.
Yes.
I think that they are an advantage, as you'd say, to be sitting on the side of the road. If you're on a spot where you can get off, or you have that shoulder to get to, if you are in a driving range situation, and your forward flasher still may not be good enough, if you got that extra visibility that's up high, but not as straight at eye level with people's windshields. I mean, if you're at a high spot, it's good to see that. But something that's going to be visible 360 degrees, I'm kind of opposed to. But something that's in the rear, just to say, hey, I'm here, so they can see what's coming in front of them, will let them know. But I also have a question. In years past, along with that, we've had several vehicles I've seen in Oklahoma, Kansas, and Texas that run audible devices as well. So if you could put that on there as what the rule is for that, that would be awesome.
Yeah, only emergency vehicles can have an audible siren. On that, there's different types of sirens we have, or air horns and different things. Now, obviously, an air horn's a little different because it's a horn. It's not a continuous blaring siren or a yelp or a wail on that. I mean, our big rigs and stuff have air horns and all those things there. It just shouldn't be used continuously, and it's only for a warning, the way the horns work in the state here. I like lights to the rear, even on traffic stops when I pull people over, especially in a metropolitan area, and going through a lot of TIMS training and being a TIMS instructor, there's no reason I need to be keeping my front lights on to opposing traffic. It's a big distraction. Our whole goal is to not have secondary crashes on our roadways, so the less amount of light I have to opposing traffic, the better. So it's one of those that if you have rear lights on, that's good if you're stopped. I think that's a good thing. Some of the best lights I have are road flares. People are terrified of fire. I mean, that's just the thing. I mean, I used them in the daytime this week in the ice storms, I put that 2 foot from my car and they'll drive 9 foot in the median to get away from it. And that works way better than any light I've got in my car too. So there's good technology out there. The main thing is I don't want you guys getting hit either, because if you guys get hit, there could be potential injuries, especially if you guys are outside of your vehicles, or now that pulls law enforcement away from maybe some other details to work a fender bender or a car crash. And a lot of folks, if they slide off and get in the ditch, they panic. You guys probably have more experience under stress than a lot of our motoring public does out here, but people lose their minds. I mean, truly that happens a lot. They're diving under the bridges, parking, and we're trying to continuously keep traffic flowing because we don't want to have a big congestion in the middle of a storm, especially if there's a major storm coming. We want to keep that traffic flowing.
And go ahead, Reed.
If we're standing on the side of the road, are we required to wear an orange safety vest?
No. Great idea. You want to make yourself as most visible as can. So in Kansas, that's a great, when you talk about being outside the vehicle, Reed. Here in Kansas, no one is allowed to be stopped on the interstate system. So if you're on an I-highway anywhere in the state of Kansas, you are not allowed to be on the shoulder of the roadway unless there is an emergency. Talking on the phone, taking pictures, texting, that is not considered an emergency. It's pretty much you're in a crash, your car's broke down, that is it. Now, it's a little bit different. I hate to disclose all the information, but US and K highways, there's no stipulation on that. So you can be on the shoulder of the roadway, to make a phone call. Now, it is not safe, guys. In this day and age, with everybody using their phones illegally or even talking on it with that distraction, the potential of getting slammed into is extremely high because people are not watching like we should be.
All right, I'd like to change the subject, and Reed and I are going to comment, I think, and then hear what you all have to say. May 2013, I'm north of Beto Junction, and I'm watching what was later rated an EF3 tornado and I'm listening to a Topeka radio station that's in their coverage area, and there's no tornado warning. It's obvious that they don't know there's a tornado. Trying to call the National Weather Service, can't get through. It's a continuous busy signal. So I called 911, and the dispatcher's like, why are you calling me? Reed, have you, and I just couldn't get through to anyone. Reed, have you had a similar problem? And then I'm going to ask the question, but I want to hear if you've had a similar experience of not being able to get hold of anyone.
The closest I had to that one was the Wadena, Minnesota tornado in 2010. And this one was there was an initial storm that was moving south to north next to a warm front that put down a really big wedge that sadly produced a fatality near Elmora Bluffton tornado on June 17, 2010. And then that storm lifted off to the north and then immediately died as it moved into the stable air, and a new storm instantly developed off to its southeast, and in a matter of minutes it already had a large tornado on the ground to the south of Wadena. And we were watching this large tornado come in and called 911, and I said, there's a tornado on the ground, and she's like, we already know about that, and then hung up on me. But she thought I was referring to the Elmora Bluffton tornado that had just weakened just minutes before that, but this is a new storm coming in from the south. So I called back again a second time, and they said, okay, we'll sound the siren, and we were right there in Wadena, and then the siren didn't sound, but then I called a third time, and just were minutes later, just as it was coming into the south side of town, and then the sirens were sounded there. So I've had a few instances like that, and then live streaming video started. We'd be running live streams and social media, and there are just so many different channels to deliver information when we're out there storm chasing, and we're trying to drive at the same time, so you have to pull over and do all this and deliver those reports, all while you're trying to chase and probably keep your windshields intact as well. But I think it's important to open up a discussion and maybe have a streamlined method of delivering those reports.
That's what I want to do. I want to ask each of the participants, here's the question. The National Weather Service, at least here in Wichita, seems to only have a single line for reporting tornadoes. You can never get through when there's severe weather. And some NWS offices actually include in their tornado warnings to report the tornado, call National Weather Service or local law enforcement. The question I have is, and I'd like to go down the line, are the dispatchers trained to get those phone calls and act upon them? So could we maybe start with you, Richard?
Certainly. I can't speak for the entire state, but I can speak with pretty good confidence for Sedgwick County. For those of you that are not from Sedgwick County, we have a centralized 911 system here that handles all public safety from one centralized location. Law enforcement, fire, EMS, emergency management, and they also control, because the emergency management offices are within the same building, they also control all of the storm sirens for Sedgwick County. Our dispatchers, I have full confidence in being capable of handling those calls. Our 911 building here in Wichita, Sedgwick County actually is an F5 rated building that we would like to think they can handle most anything that the weather wants to throw at them. To my knowledge, we haven't had any issues like that, not to say that it couldn't happen tomorrow, but as the largest sheriff's office here in the state, I'm certain that we have absolute full confidence in our local 911 system here because of the resources they have immediately available inside the same building.
And so they'd relay it to the Weather Service, turn on sirens or whatever's needed.
Right, and we actually have radio-to-radio communications. We have a direct link with the Weather Bureau here in Wichita. That's what I thought, but I wanted to make sure. Right, so even if there was a catastrophic failure of the public telephone network, we actually have two-way radio communications. We have a P25 trunking system here that's not only functional with all local public safety in the county, but also works across the state, as Chad will elaborate maybe on here also. But again, for our particular area, I wouldn't see that as being an occurrence.
Okay. Chad, could you maybe talk about other parts of the state? What is your assessment on that?
We're a little different, being the patrol. We have a centralized dispatch for the entire state out of Salina, Kansas. So if a crash or an emergency would happen here in Sedgwick County, when you dial 911, it's going down to Sedgwick County 911 here. For us to get any information, then Sedgwick County 911 then would in turn call us. So there's going to be a complete pause in time there. It could be however long it takes 911 to immediately get us called in Salina to get that information. Now, we do have a direct line from any cell phones anywhere in the state of Kansas. If you're anywhere in the state of Kansas, if you dial *47, that's HP for Highway Patrol. That'll go to our 911 dispatch center out of Salina at that end of it. But anywhere else in any of the other counties in the state, when you dial 911, it'll take you to that county's 911 system, and then they would relay that then to the Kansas Highway Patrol. We also run the P25 system for all of our troopers in all of the counties across the state for us. I mean, for us, a lot of the information we get for the weather related is when our dispatch gives us to it. So when the National Weather Service puts something out, then they tell us over the radio. So sometimes, you know, however many calls we're getting, we might be behind on the law enforcement side of it too. So we rely a lot. I listen to a lot of the radio, not my P25 system, but AM, FM radio in severe storms, listening to a lot of the local news stations and radio stations to keep my information up, because a lot of times I can't see what I'm driving into either, and I'm relying solely on what I'm getting over the radio.
Okay, Carrie?
Well, our county's kind of an odd animal in that we actually have 3 911 centers in our county. I think we're one of the only holdouts that has more than one piece out. So depending on where you are, if you're going through our county, you may or may not get the county 911 center picking up, or you may get one of our 2 communities that have their independent 911 centers. Pretty confident in thinking that if you get one of our dispatchers, regardless if it's the city or the county, that you won't get a stunned silence of, what do you want me to do about it? Hopefully they will act on that information. I'll tell you what normally happens is when we do have severe weather coming into our county, the Emergency Management Emergency Operations Center is activated. We are actively watching weather. We have spotters out and about. And usually if a call comes in directly to our 911 center saying, hey, we see a tornado, or hey, there's, you know, golf ball size, Volkswagen size hail landing on a community, most of the time what they will do is, rather than relaying that information to the National Weather Service, they will relay that to us, and then we gather all of that information, act as that conduit to relay that to the Weather Service. So if you do call 911, I'm hoping that they will pass that information on to us so that we can get it to the Weather Service to help with their warning decisions. We also do have that triggering of the storm sirens co-located with our 911 center as well. So if it's one of those immediate life safety things where you're on the phone screaming, the tornado is rolling into El Dorado right now, then hopefully the sirens also get flipped at the same time. But that's usually the information flow, is it's going from either public reports, spotter reports, to us, to the Weather Service.
We're very similar to Kansas as far as the state goes. If you dial 911, you're not going to get us. You're going to get a local emergency center, and then the information will be passed to us, so there would be a delay. Now, similar to star 47, we have star 55. Now, I will tell you, we've worked very hard that when they put you on hold, you can hear that music really loud. I'm just kidding. You can't get put on hold. I will tell you this, be cautious. If you dial star 55 in Oklahoma, and you tell them you're on Interstate 35, make sure you tell them what county you're in, because there have been instances where you might be in Blackwell, Oklahoma, which is close to the Kansas-Oklahoma border, and you dial star 55, and it gives you the headquarters in Ardmore down by the Texas line. So make sure they know where you're at. The one thing I will say, as far as the dispatchers, they are trained. They welcome the information, but I would say this. Please understand that if there's inclement weather, their phones are ringing off the wall. So while you think that they're being short with you, they're just being quick, because the calls are stacking up. So if you have some very good information to give them, give it to them fast, and understand they need to get you off the phone. They're not being rude, and they want your information, and they will pass it on to us. If you call in and say, you know, we've got a funnel spotted here, it's headed this direction, thank you very much, hang up. They don't need a bunch of other information, they're going to pass it on. But again, don't think they're being rude. They're really busy. And depending on the which center you call, we might have one dispatcher on, maybe 2 at the most, unless you're in Oklahoma City center, and you might get 3. So they're really busy during inclement weather. So just keep that in mind when you dial star 55.
Then I have another question, and then we're...
No.
I have a whole bunch of questions, but I want to ask this, and then we're going to turn it over to the floor. How's that sound? Okay, the next question I have is, there were several incidents in 2012, 2013, 2014, where it appeared instrumented vehicles were simply being pulled over. No tickets, to my knowledge, were written, and apparently there was one officer in southeast Kansas near Coffeyville who was literally sitting along the state line, and every time an instrumented vehicle came up from Oklahoma, was pulling the people over to express his displeasure with storm chasing. And I heard about this from many people. I believe something indeed happened. What should the storm chasers' attitude should be? Does the Highway Patrol have a policy of discouraging instrumented vehicles? What is, Reed, have you encountered any of this?
I honestly haven't had too many bad problems with law enforcement at all.
Okay, good.
There was
good.
one issue near Dodge City when I was approaching the Dodge City tornado.
Right.
And the police officer looked like he was blocking the road there. And he had family members that were hanging out of the car videotaping it. And there was a split second where I was like, oh, this could be a storm chaser with some flashing lights on it. And I proceeded to go off into the dirt and went around the roadblock, which in hindsight was a mistake. But we met up at Applebee's after that, later on in Dodge City, and we discussed it, and everything was fine. But I haven't really had too many problems.
Okay.
And during storms, I mean, everybody's intense.
No, this
and
was
fired
before
up
the storms fired.
Yeah.
This was, and again, there were a couple of different incidents of this. So I would like to ask our colleagues in law enforcement, what are your, there were so many reports, I believe something really was going on. What are your thoughts about that? How should the storm chaser react? Any advice?
And again, I'm going to address it within our office here in Wichita, Sedgwick County. We would certainly have expectation of any of our deputies having some type of probable cause or some reason to stop that vehicle in the first place. Was there a traffic infraction? Was there something that drew attention to that vehicle and that driver that precipitated the traffic stop? We have policies in place that if any of the citizenry ever feels that they were unjustly detained by one of our personnel, whether it be for a traffic infraction, simply stopping you on the sidewalk, or even the fact that if we had a deputy who was less than professional, we would certainly expect you as a person expecting an absolute high level of professionalism from our deputies, that you would make us aware of it. And as with most large law enforcement agencies, all of them have something, you may have heard the word internal affairs or professional standards, which typically is a dedicated small group of individuals within that agency that follow up on citizenry complaints against law enforcement officers with that organization. That's how I would approach it, and we would certainly expect our personnel to handle themselves accordingly. And most law enforcement agencies are, you're either policy driven or you're statutorily driven. That gives you the directions that you follow most all the time. And again, for larger agencies, our policies consisted of volumes of policies, and of course, clearly defined state and federal case law that also gives us direction. So I can't offer any explanation for the matter in another part of the state, but I can tell you how we typically would operate here.
Okay. Chad and Pat, any comments?
Yeah. Across the state, I mean, we have troopers in all our county, well, most all of our counties. We do have some vacancies right now. But the majority of the things that we do is traffic enforcement. There is a lot of equipment laws in Kansas statutes. So there's a lot of different things that can get you pulled over for violating the law, not even knowing it, like having too many lights on your vehicle, having too many auxiliary lights on your vehicle, having different colored lights on your vehicle, not having a tag light, you know, a lot of different things. And it would definitely, if I saw something like the Dominator going down the road now, I'm not going to pull it over just because I see it. I'd like to see it more, but I mean, I'd wait till he had to gas up. It's a gas guzzler, I'm sure. So, you know, I have jurisdiction across the state, so I could just follow him until he has to fuel up, and then I'd be like, hey, can I check it out now? But, you know, it's some of those things, too, that when we do a lot of modifications to our vehicles and things, that's why we have our vehicles inspected in the state of Kansas. If we have any antique or restore things, it has to go through an inspection process to make sure it is street legal at those times. So sometimes if you have different things on your vehicle, it may be now too tall, it may be too wide in violation of state statutes. Now, are officers being nitpicky? I don't know. I mean, I've arrested a lot of wanted felons off of a minor traffic stop for equipment violations. Probably not going to be doing that when we're in a hailstorm or big weather's happening. I can't, like I say, speak for every law enforcement officer in the state. We are the same way. Every citation or warning that we issue, which we will give you paper on, we don't do verbals, anything. So we'll have our name, our contact information, and if you would like to, you know, file a complaint or say that that wasn't a professional stop, please do. I mean, that's very important. We work, and the patrol's always had great professionalism with the public, and we want you guys to let us know if somebody's not doing something correctly. And if not, if you guys make alterations to your vehicle, you can call any of the counties or the highway patrols or the police departments and say, hey, I want to put this on my vehicle before you go spend hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars on something that might not be street legal in the state of Kansas or Oklahoma. We'll be glad to, if we don't know, we'll find out for you. But it's very important that you guys communicate with us so we don't feel like there's some kind of struggle between law enforcement and the chasers.
Pat.
I don't really have much to add because we're pretty much the same way, and I would echo what the undersheriff said. In any case, whether it was because of a traffic stop or just some kind of encounter with one of our troopers or law enforcement, there are avenues in which to file a complaint, and I agree with what Mike said in the very beginning. Obviously, on the side of the road is not the place to have that argument, but there are avenues that if someone was unprofessional, that you could follow and get it reported. And I would hope that every one of the stops that we make, our guys make, there's probable cause. There has to be probable cause for the stop. So just seeing some equipment is not probable cause to make a stop. So that's all I would add.
All right, I'd like to open it up to the floor. If I doubt this will be the case. I have plenty of questions if there aren't questions from the floor, but I think there will be. So let's get started.
What are the rules for using mounts for cameras inside of a front windshield?
Well, I'll tell you, in Oklahoma, the biggest thing is the placement of it. If it interferes with the driver's view, then it would be a violation of the law. So it would depend on where it's at. But having something hooked to the windshield inside is not a violation in and of itself. I mean, you see these suction cup deals where people put their cell phones up there. Those are fine. I will say this. Keep in mind we have a distracted driver law in Oklahoma. So if you're paying attention to whatever is on the windshield, you know, if you're looking at a map or something like that and you're distracted, that's a violation, so you need to be careful about that. But the exact placement, the main concern is so long as it does not obstruct the driver's view.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Reed's got a question.
I know recently there's been a few vehicles, storm chaser vehicles that are tornado interceptors that are designed after police vehicles, and they almost look exactly like police vehicles. Is that illegal as well, or impersonating police vehicles, or is there a line, or is it more of a subjective determination by the police officers? I don't. I usually chase in a rental car these days, but.
Buy the extra policy, don't you?
Always, yeah. Always a $20 insurance.
Well, Chad and I are honestly, we would probably both give you the same answer, because as a sheriff's office in the state of Kansas, we enforce state statute just like the Kansas Highway Patrol does. Noticeably so, there's a lot of old police cars out running around. I mean, I saw 3 or 4 just on the way over here this afternoon. One of them I did a double take on because it still had a cage in the back seat. You know, as far as ownership of a retired law enforcement vehicle, there's nothing that we can directly say about that. But again, the equipment that is attached to that car, if it's not removed, which, surprising enough, there are some agencies in some places that don't completely strip out the public safety equipment that would belong on those cars. I mean, typically you might see a spotlight on the side or a big cow catcher on the front bumper and maybe a couple of antennas, and that's really about it. But there are other places, and even public websites where they do online auctions. You can buy a fire truck, you can buy an ambulance, you can buy a police car, and they're completely decked out. Sirens, lights, whatever the case. I mean, everything's short of a long gun on the dash, perhaps. Some even sell them with radios. So they're going to be out there, but it's how are those things utilized? And if they're activated, that becomes a horse of a different color, and there's the potential there for law enforcement intervention. I would just leave it at that. But Chad, you want to follow?
And like you say, there's definitions in Kansas to be what's considered an emergency vehicle, but it's truly when things are activated. So it's hard for me to know if those LEDs in the back window of your car, when they're not on, are red or blue, amber, white, whatever they may be. There's no violation at that time because they're not activated. So if you guys are from this area, you know what the sheriff's office's old cars look like. So the two-tone, the Shamus going down the road. So you still see some of those going down there stripped off, and you can see where the decals were and see where it says sheriff and all that down it. A lot of agencies down there, you'll see the push bumpers and all that. But a lot of those things, like we say, in turn don't make something illegal by itself. It's just how things are being utilized.
I don't want to. I can give a really, this is a funny story, and this is a real story. I had picked up a new car here a couple years back, and I don't remember what it was now. It was a 4-door sedan of some kind, and I drive an unmarked car, but it does have deck lights in the back and lights in the front end behind the grill. And I am sitting at a stoplight one evening. A trooper pulls up beside me, and then I see him back up. And then I see him pull back up again, and he's, I'm in plain clothes. And I listened to the local law enforcement channels, so I was listening to KHP here in Wichita, and the guy ran the tag on my car to see who it belonged to. So if you have one, they'll watch for you.
All right, I saw a question over here. Go ahead.
Especially addressed to the gentleman from Oklahoma.
Yes.
Both when I ran my storm chase tour company and then chasing on my own, I have had issues with sheriffs who decide to shut down roads. In April of 2012, about 40 miles east of Woodward, the sheriff chose to shut down a major 2-lane that bisected 412. And there had to have been at least 40 cars parked at the intersection trying to film the storm. He kept anyone from going north after it. And of course you know about what happened with the tornado where the roads were blocked to the south out of Oklahoma City. If there was a touchdown, it would have been a disaster. Could you, and also on my tour, we were east of Woodward. We were just east of Woodward, and a sheriff pulled me over, and he said, "What's going on?" I said, "Well, look up ahead. There's a multi-vortex tornado." "Thanks for the information, sir." We kept going east, and I think it was the same guy, because we were following to block all traffic from getting any closer, and we missed our storm. And it's really frustrating. So could you speak to that?
Well, obviously, I can't speak for that situation because I don't know all the circumstances. But as far as shutting off a road, I will tell you from our perspective, and Chad mentioned a term earlier. Some of you may be familiar with it, some may not. The term was TIMS, which is the Traffic Incident Management System. And I will tell you, even when I started in law enforcement, I won't say when that was, but it was a long time ago. After horses. But back then, you know, the psychology for us was, and our MO was to, if there was an accident or something, you know, we wanted to shut down the road so that nobody would get up in the way. And in our mindset at the time, it was better for us because nobody would drive through the crash scene, nobody would get hurt that was standing around. I will tell you that has changed now. We realize that stopped traffic is more of a hazard than smooth flowing traffic. So across the country, there has been a wave for the last several years with traffic incident management training to teach all public safety professionals, including record drivers, how to get the road cleared as soon as possible and keep the traffic flowing. Now, having said that, obviously law enforcement has the right, the absolute right, to close down any road if they feel like there's a hazard ahead that would you know, cause that to be done. But it is not our choice or our liking, actually, to have a road shut down. We want traffic moving. Does that, I'm not sure that answers your question, but does it?
I'm going to jump in on that one point. There was an incident in southern Illinois in 2016 where the road was shut down, the tornado veered and hit parked cars that were shut down, that were stationary because the road had been shut down. And one of my concerns is, do law enforcement people have the expertise needed to shut the road down intelligently? And frankly, and I say this with great respect, I think I trust the people in this room to know better where the tornado's going to go than your average law enforcement, but I could be wrong. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, and I can speak to one incident that I was personally involved in, and I will tell you that we have a direct line to the National Weather Service, especially in Oklahoma, so we interact with them on a regular basis, and they are some great folks. If we get a report that a funnel is on the ground and it's going to cross a highway, we are absolutely going to shut it down on both sides and let it get past. But we're going to do that on, you know, some very specific information provided to us. There's one on the ground, it's moving this direction, it's going to cross that highway. We'll shut it down for that amount of time and then we'll open it back up. But again, the circumstance you're speaking of, and again, I wasn't there, but it sounds questionable to me whether that was a good call. So.
Yeah, my concern is that there were about 40 cars at that small intersection, and I tried to get around. There was one lane up where you could pass through. In other words, that intersection was blocked, and because so many people were stacked on the side, there was just one lane through. And you know, not only frustrating, when I tried to get around it, then it was scary.
Well, again, you can't stop on any roadway in Oklahoma, and on the interstates you can't stop on the shoulder. But I'll let the undersheriff kind of talk about private property. Maybe he has something to say about that. But again, you know, that particular incident you've explained is concerning to me because stop traffic typically is not a good thing.
I want to go on and get some more questions, if that's all right. I saw one over here. Yes. Or should we?
Citizens that do roadblocks? Storm chaser roadblock?
I think that all of us in the law enforcement profession up here would probably agree with the fact that law enforcement has every intention of making the right decision. Yes, there may be other information available. Is it available to us is a valid question. And we are enjoined with the responsibility of protection of life and property. I would like to say that our deputies are going to make the best decision they have at the time with the information they have available. We train them, we empower them, we expect them to make decisions. Beyond that, at the time that decision is made, if I'm not there, I'm not going to second guess it then because I'm not there. Not to say that not all decisions are always 100% correct, but I think everybody, even in this room, would understand that in the height of everything that's going on in the middle of a significant event, we're making decisions like this. We don't have time to take a vote and a popular opinion. We have to act with what we have available at the time, and so they make it. And I think anybody in any type of public safety environment, whether it be law enforcement, fire, EMS, even emergency management, what sirens do I turn on? They're going to turn on the ones that at that point are a valid decision. If it's the wrong ones, they made a mistake, but it was an honest mistake.
Now, when it comes to some of these situations, it's no different than some of our ice days we just had this week. You know, we got slammed this week, and we didn't have the manpower. We just couldn't keep up with as much freezing conditions that were going on. So when I teach, defensive driving classes and things like that to the public, what should you do if you come to the scene of a crash? You should render aid. You should do all these things as the number one, right? Well, if you don't know how to render aid, then what good are you? Now you're a pedestrian outside of the vehicle on an icy, cruddy day or in the middle of a hailstorm or rain or whatever it may be. Communicate and be visible. Now, can you guys shut roads down? I mean, if you parked your car in the roadway, you could, but that's not what I want you to do. Now, if you know what's a safe location, you know that people are getting ready to drive in it, is it an emergency? You can't park on the interstate, right, unless it's an emergency. So you can park on the shoulder of the interstate if it's an emergency, because it could be, But like I said, I still don't want you outside of your vehicles because you could get hit. Now, can you roll your windows down and start flagging traffic, flapping like a chicken? That's what I do on the ice days. I might be 3/4 of a mile on the backside of that bridge with my lights on. They're like, well, what's he doing? He's got his lights on. Well, I'm flapping, like, slow down. You're about to drive up on something and kill everybody that's on the other side of this bridge. You do what you can with what you got, and flapping like a chicken saved me for 16 years so far in warning motorists, because I only need that one professional driver. I only need that one 18-wheeler. He knows what that means. Right. And he can start slowing everybody down for me. And, slowly that can start changing things down the roadway. I don't know what the best way to do it. Like I said, it's everybody's safety out there, but that could be an option out there.
Okay. No. Oh, okay. All right. Go ahead.
I'm just wondering, how often does law enforcement get together and discuss how to handle this group? Like, develop best practices.
This would be a first for me. Really, unless we're invited to something, or we go through the train spotting seminars that go around the state every single year in the counties that we can go voluntarily to that. Other than that, that's about the only time I would have a chance to meet folks that are train spotters or chasers or anything that could go out. We're pretty big, at least the patrol, our resource officers on social media. We're the tweeting troopers. You can always reach out to us and send us emails, find out things, invite us to different things, or ask us questions at any times too. And I know that goes for any of the law enforcement agencies.
Have you ever had a meeting where you discuss storm chasers? Let's ask that.
We have not that I know of on the Kansas Highway Patrol.
Well, I'd like to chime in on that. Just that at a local level, I believe some of those conversations are happening. I know in our county, we will do annual severe weather training. We actually take the material produced by the National Weather Service and we'll re-deliver it to our public safety agencies. And so one of the things we do try to hammer home with our first response agencies and our public safety agencies is there is a definite place and a need for that ground truth information, and that folks that are out there with eyes on the storm are actually doing something valuable because they're bringing back that that info, that eyes on the storm that we don't have in the EOC, that the National Weather Service doesn't have in their radar room, and trying to help them understand that there is a whole warning process that goes beyond just the guy behind the camera on TV and the guy behind the radar in the National Weather Service. So
Go ahead.
we're trying at a
Go ahead.
local level.
Nope.
Worst case scenario, I'm going down a highway,
You-
highway, limited access, tornado in front of me. Am I allowed to use any of the crossover points to get into the other lane going the other way?
Yeah. So the turnarounds on the interstates and a lot of the highways, unless there is a drive proceeding, like to go into another street, a trailer park, something like that, it's only used for emergency and maintenance vehicles. Now, if a tornado's coming at you, is it worth a $185 ticket to turn through the median for your life? Yeah, I mean, it's one of those situations. As long as you aren't going to impede and somebody's going to hit you as you pull out of there. I mean, that's the situation where you're violating the law to save your own life. Now, if that tornado is coming at me, I'm not stopping you. So,
Okay, go ahead.
based on what can be up there, similar to Oklahoma too, no. I mean, you can have different things in there. I mean, there's only statutes that talk about you can't go below the AS1 line with window tint, but it doesn't say anything about cameras and K-tags and anything like that. Now, at the bottom of the windshield, you can't have any graphics down. At the bottom portion of it, your windshield can't be tinted, but you can have your personal cameras. And once you're talking about cameras and stuff, you know, cameras are a great thing, you know, just for general automobile accidents and crashes that happen. I encourage people to have them, but please keep them out of your field of view. That way you're not distracted by any way that you can see when you're making left, right-hand turns,
Jeff.
things like that.
Jeff, go ahead.
Okay, so question for law enforcement, because I've been forced to be stopped a couple of times, talking to the kid. Why might get pulled over? But anyway, it's a great story. How many of the officers in Kansas, Oklahoma have radar apps or radar visuals on their laptops or their cell phones in situations where, so you're just, you know, up to date as we are, but is it a state policy? If you guys have it, if you need it, come talk to me, I want to help you. Because what I'm afraid is in a lot of situation awareness situations that when we have tornadoes and things, you go in damage areas, and while you're trying to deal with the damage and the people in rubble, you've got other tornadoes coming at you in on severe weather. So I find it a huge need in many states around the United States that the officers out in the field that are there don't have the you know, the knowledge.
No, understand, but ask a question.
So the question is, do you have access to that data? Does all the officers have access to that data from the trooper level, state and county level? That's it.
For the patrol side, we all have mobile data units in our patrol cars. If they're functioning, it just depends where you're at in the state, if you have connection to internet at that time. We don't use any specific apps or anything, or I use the local stations down here if I'm doing that. And a lot of it, though, my problem is I'm always going from point A to point B when these things are happening, and that's how I rely on the radio. I mean, just listening to the AM, FM radio, because I don't want to be looking at that, especially in the inclement weather, because I'm no better. I mean, distracted driving's horrible, even for me trying to navigate to a car crash, but I can't be looking at my computer because I just can't do it.
Go ahead.
You start, because you haven't got to talk as much.
Well, I think it's good for storm chasers and law enforcement to get together just like this because you realize that police officers are human too, as well. And and the more that we interact with you guys in the field as well, it's always been a positive experience. And I think that if we could talk back and forth a lot more too, I think that's good. But I haven't had maybe less roadblocks. I'd enjoy that. But
I would second that also. I think the best way to not only solve a problem but to prevent a problem from occurring is just good, honest communication, and in lieu of hearsay and third-party information and things like that. Let's go to the source, and this is a really good example of that right now. Clearly, you all have a lot of interest in what we do and why we do it, how we do it. At the same time, we're certainly listening to your questions and trying to give you an accurate response as best as we can to address what your questions might be. So if anything else, I would say maintain that open line of communication.
Okay.
No, absolutely not. I mean, it's perfect to me. If someone's blocking an intersection, or when Greensburg happened here, I got to talk to a lot of people spending about a week out there blocking traffic all day long and things, and got to talk to folks. But if I'm moving towards that, I'm going there because I know there's a tornado moving, but it's dark, I can't see anything, and my job is to warn and protect people, but it could cost me my own life doing it too. Now, never be afraid to come up and say, "You're in a bad spot, troop, man, this is going to be horrible, you need to not be blocking, it's coming up behind us, we need to get people." I'm going to listen. I mean, seriously, I'm going to listen. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Let's go, okay? I mean, that's the one thing, when we signed up, we were supposed to drive towards it, and I'm like, man, my car goes real fast, I'd like to be going the other way. But, it's to warn people, and like you say, if we don't have as much training and experience as definitely you guys here, never be afraid to stop and talk to us if you see us. Hey.
All right, we're over time. Let's do one more question, and then we'll wrap up.
As storm chasers, in addition to calling in reports when you see a tornado or severe weather, how else can storm chasers, either during or after the event, be assistance to both law enforcement and emergency management? How can we be assistance?
Well, I know during the event, the more information that we can get flowing, the better. Like I mentioned at the beginning, we have a really geographically large county, and we historically have areas of our county that are not very well covered. We don't have a lot of eyes just because the population's not there, but we still need to know if storms are brewing out there that may be moving toward our populated areas. So especially in that time when the storms are moving in on us and they're really active, is getting that flow of information so we know exactly what's happening in our county and if we have folks that are at risk. Information is probably the biggest thing that emergency management needs. And if you come on an area that's been hit, getting an information flow back to us so that we know an initial idea of, are we dealing with damages? Are we dealing with injuries? Are we dealing with, do we have areas of town that are collapsed? Well, we'll obviously get other sources of information flowing in as well, but again, anything that can help us round out that picture of how big, how bad is extremely valuable.
Okay.
Hey, Mike, can I ask one about those of us that are medically trained about...
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I apologize. I should have raised my hand a little bit sooner. Get stage fright, please. All right, so I'm an EMT. I've got a background from law enforcement as well as volunteer firefighter from the Wichita County area. Being a storm chaser also, as soon as I start seeing injuries or see damage, my first instinct is to grab my med bag and respond. We know that there is a stigmatism, not because of the people here, but the general public that just wants to get a camera out and go, that law enforcement kind of does frown upon some storm chasers. In the event that we are medically trained, what can we do to maybe not at that time, but later work with you to where if we're in that area and there's citizens in your neighborhood that are injured, what can we do to communicate with you to where we're able to assist with the knowledge that we have?
I think on the local level, and we've had circumstances just like what you're talking about come to the surface. Typically in a catastrophic event like that, where you're going to have a significant amount of property damage and injury to citizenry. In our EMS system here in Wichita, Sedgwick County, the very first thing we're going to do upon arriving at scene is they're going to start triaging people, and they're going to have a centralized point of staging for medical personnel that everybody will be transported to, which is separate from the search and rescue part. So we would probably direct you to where the triage area, the staging point is at, and then literally tell you to work with the EMS staff there in lieu of law enforcement.
All right, let me point out something. Each of these gentlemen and lady are here on their day off. And they're here because they want to increase their knowledge of storm chasing, they want to improve communications, and we all want to provide better information to the public. So I would like each of you to give them a big hand for taking their day off and interacting with us. This session is done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm glad none of us felt like that water bottle, because I gotta say, things felt a little precarious for a little while. We'll shake.
I'm sorry?
Thank you guys so much.
Here in Wichita. Uh-huh. Yeah, I'm the keynote speaker this evening. You'll learn more about it then. Stephen, nice to meet you. Great, thank you for coming.
Hey folks, we're going to actually pull a couple of door prizes here, so grab your red tickets. Actually, Mike, could you do me a big favor and pull a raffle ticket for us? Let's see who we got here. We have a bunch of prizes up here at on the front, up here where the computer and everything is, and you're more than welcome to pick any one of those prizes that you want. We have stuff from Storm Assist back in the back, from AccuWeather. We have prizes from Weather Graphics, a lot of books and such, and our Silver Lining Tours booth. We have a ticket up here for one item, anything back there you want, one item. And the first ticket number is, last three digits, 358. All right, right up in the front. Congratulations. I'll take that from you. And just come up here and pick anything you want to. We also have some 2019 tornado calendars that are just loaded with really, really neat picks from a lot of different storm chasers. Great. All right. Thank you. And you know what? Since you won this one, I'm gonna let you pick the next winner. We'll do three of them. All right. We have ticket number 506. Does anybody have 506? Wow. No winner, huh? 506 going once, twice. All right, let's pick a different one. If you would, grab me a new one in there. How about number 566? 566. Nobody's got that one either. 566 going once, twice. All right, Roger, how about you? You know, pick us a winner in there. This guy's got a great name, doesn't he? What do we got?
Right. 518. 518.
518. All right, we have a winner. I knew you'd pick the right one there. All right, come on up. Now, take your ticket and just pick anything off the table you'd like. So, are we ready? About ready, James? About ready to go? Okay. I'll do a couple more then. All right, we're going to do another one here. What do we got?
See if I can separate them here. Come on. All right. 578. 578.
578. Anybody have number 578? All right, we got a winner again. Great, I'll take your ticket.
Oh, I think you do it again.
Oh. And is anything on the table you'd like? Folks, and just a reminder, after we get done with Roger Edwards' talk, we're going to vacate the room up here in the table area. You're please welcome to go back and hang out in the vendor area for a while. And then at 5 o'clock, we're going to actually have everybody remove themselves from the room so we can get it all set up for the banquet meal. And then we'll come back at 6 o'clock through that door that we come in and out of in the corner and have our meal. All right, it's my pleasure to introduce our next guest, Mr. Roger Edwards from the Storm Prediction Center. It's a pleasure having him up here to talk to us again, and his topic today is the truth about chasing for science. Roger, it's all yours.
Left and right, and then the middle, the green button there at the top is your laser. Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
Do you need a lavalier, or do you want that hand tilt?
Yeah, I'll do the hand.
Hand tilt? Okay.
Just hold it by.
Good to go?
Yeah, hold it by the bottom, by the.
This part, okay, cool. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and step up here. I don't think you necessarily want to see me better, but in case you do, I'll go ahead and step up here so that I can see that to be a little bit better prompted. First of all, thanks so much, Roger. Again, fantastic first name. I agree with you completely. For inviting me out here, and to everybody here in the audience, the panel that was up here a while ago, very good information. So I'm going to change the topic a little bit and veer on over toward the scientific side. Storm chasing for science. How real is it? How real is it not? See if I can, oh, there we go. So a little bit of background on my chase experience and science experience. I started chasing before I became a scientist back as a student at OU, Boomer Sooner. You're 7-time national football champions and even more national men's gymnastics champions. And I started back in the old Toto days in NSSL as a student, and that thing doesn't work, so I'll just point this out. This is the original meat wagon, the vehicle that I drove when I first started chasing. It was a 1972 Vista Cruiser station wagon. It's a good chase vehicle. Pretty immune to hail. 7,500 pounds of beauty. That is Toto. Got on as a student assistant at the lab as an undergrad for my first couple of years there, and was involved in spring programs, including the Toto project. You can see Dave Hoadley, a master artist, of course, in his art, depicting Toto being dropped off in front of a farm that they thought it was a new water heater. So that was my start, was dropping off water heaters in front of gust fronts and mesocyclones. We didn't get any tornado hits on Toto when we were there. And in the 88D verification projects for the prototype 88Ds in the early 1990s, late 1980s period, I chased for those. We were paid to drive into mesocyclones at night. So it was an interesting experience for a student like me who had only known how to drive for about 4 or 5 years at the time. it was a good way to learn. So these are the projects I participated in. Had a lot of fun storm chasing for science, for real, for the first several years of my chase career, and went out chasing on my own. But as old folks like Roger and others might remember, chasing in the late 1980s was a sparse endeavor. Tornadoes basically did not happen in the Southern Plains back then. So tornado-wise, I went over my first 61 chases, and over a span of about 5 years, but persistence pays. I've authored a few scientific papers, and I forecast severe storms for a living. So this is something I'm really passionate about. I love chasing, I love science, I like to bridge the gap between research and operations and forecasting. And even a recent contribution here, you might recognize this event. This was the Piedmont El Reno tornado from May 24th of 2011. In this particular case, hopefully you can see it on another screen too, ERPT, El Reno Piedmont Tornado T2 is a satellite tornado that formed on the forward flank updraft region and got drawn into the mesocyclone and became almost equal in strength to the original El Reno Piedmont tornado. This is looking back southwest toward El Reno from near Piedmont, where I was. They merged physically and became that bad mother wedge tornado, to put it scientifically. And this was a photo contribution to a paper that Mike French, Pat Skinner, and others wrote on that process. And the story was really neat because I got this paper out of the blue. I didn't even know they were working on it. I got this paper out of the blue to review. And I'm reading about it, and I thought, wait a second. They're talking about how there's some missing observational information or missing corroboration observationally during the time frame that this was happening. I thought, well, I thought that was a separate tornado that moved around, separate satellite that moved around the back and dissipated. No, it merged. A rare tornado merger, an intensification process. So in an unusual event, the authors got a paper back from one of their reviewers saying, hey, I photographed this thing that you're talking about, and here it is. And it ended up in the paper. So that was a really neat thing to be able to contribute to someone else's published science that way. I don't expect you to read this. This is just for illustrative purposes. These are papers that I've been involved with, mostly as a lead or co-author, in which storm observing insights contributed in some way, shape, or form off of my whole CV publications list. The ones in yellow were directly based on storm chasing information or storm observing information in some way, shape, or form, played an important role in the development of those research papers. And you can go to my publications page at SPC. I will say also, and let me throw this caveat in here right now, I'm not representing SPC, I'm not here on behalf of my workplace, this is all entirely on my own. But the fact is, you can go there and look at these papers and see the contributions that chasing directly made to them. So is chasing for science legitimate or garbage? Well, that's the answer. It depends on whether you're chasing for science is real or whether it's bogus. And only you know that. I'm not going to prejudge that. I can't crack open your skull and read it. I do see a lot of statements like this on social media. Chasing for the science, gathering data to improve warnings. Some of that's from meteorologists. Storm tracker warning unit 5 plastered all over the side of a vehicle. Needless to say, I'm skeptical of this. I'm not going to say it's all a bunch of BS, but I'm highly skeptical of claims like that. This was a real photograph taken on a storm chase in Wind Cave National Park, South Dakota a few years back. And it made me think of these kind of claims. You see, I used to live in the state of Missouri. And so when I see claims like this, where are the publications? Where is your peer-reviewed science? If you're Storm Research Unit 3, show me your research. Where is it? Where's your peer-reviewed publications? If you have those publications, great. Go break it. Well, don't break a leg. But go chase. Do it, and do it safely, and do it right. But I'm skeptical when I see stuff like this, to say the least. Why? What is the... I don't get it. What is the psychological insecurity that would drive someone to advertise themselves falsely in this way when there's no research being done, when there's nothing being published in Monthly Weather Review, EJSSM, Journal of the Atmospheric Sciences, Atmospheres, whatever, you name the journal, I don't see anything in it, NWA. Needless to say, a little skeptical. Research? Don't talk about research. Are you kidding me? Research? By the way, that's Jim Moore, a former coach of the Indianapolis Colts, for those of you who are not geezers like me and don't remember his playoffs rant. Similar skepticism. Okay, enough of the negativity. This presentation is overwhelmingly positive. I want to highlight the positive contributions that storm chasing and research have done on an interwoven basis. And this man sitting right in front of me has been a huge part of that, Tim Han Solo. But before we get that far, Neal Ward, one of the early researchers, there's a nice paper written by Gene Roden on Neal Ward's contributions to storm chasing research. It's on the Storm Track website in the library archive, at least I hope it still is. It has been for many years. You can read more, so I won't go into agonizing detail, except we had an OHP trooper up here. I don't know if they would still do this today. Back in 1961, Neal rode along with an OHP trooper to a multi-vortex tornado to relay the info via OHP radio back to NSSL to verify the radar signature that this thing was indeed tornadic. He was a pioneer in a lot of ways. He did vortex chamber research, a great guy. So here's a couple of characters that you may be familiar with, especially the two on the left. I'll briefly highlight their contributions. This man is named Alan R. Mohler. He had the best possible middle name, Roger. And this is Chuck Doswell. This is Randy Zipser. I'll start with Al Mohler. Al was a longtime forecaster for the Fort Worth Weather Service office. Before he got there, he spent some time in Lubbock, and before that, he got his bachelor's and master's degrees at OU. Boomer Sooner. He participated in tornado intercept projects along with Chuck in the early 1970s and included notable events, Union City for one. Their observations of that were very valuable. Al was also a noted landscape photographer, a great photographer, one of the greatest photographers I've ever seen that you probably will never see very many of his images of because they're not online. Most of what I ever learned about photography, I learned from him. And there's some really great ones in the audience I like to follow too. He was a masterful speaker, a masterful motivator, a masterful educator, and the father of storm spotter training. It all goes back to Al, a great, great individual. A tremendous mind taken away from us way too soon by early onset Alzheimer's disease, right about the time that he retired from the National Weather Service. That lightning photo at the right was taken while I was standing right next to Al on a bluff at Fort Sumner, New Mexico back in 2003. We both clicked our shutters at the same time, got the same strike with the same composition through the sunset. And so I like to say that this is a photograph of Al's that I took because it was right there. He has hundreds of amazing storm photos that you'll probably never see, but Tim and I and Roger and others who are relatively geezers have had the privilege of sitting in on some of those presentations. And he earned a Meat Wagon Award for his contributions. There's a picture of Al in some of his later years with the Pampa tornado from back in June 8th of 1995. Spotters guides. We're coming up on the 40th anniversary of the Wichita Falls tornado, which was this one. formative dream scenario for me. I always wanted to see something like that, but not there. He was involved in the preparation of tons of storm spotter training material and formed the foundation for all the storm spotter training that exists today and for a lot of what you guys know as a result of the cascade of training that's evolved from that. That was a paper that Al lead authored along with Chuck, Mike Foster, Gary Woodall, every one of them storm chasers, a formal paper on the operational recognition of supercell environments and storm structures. A seminal paper in what we all understand, you, me, all of us understand about supercells and their behavior and how to forecast them. Chuck, his contribution, I could go on for hours about the contributions he has made to our science. But he's also a great chaser. He's been chasing for a long, long time. As I like to tell him, he probably was first pounding out his images of tornadoes into stone tablets. Chuck has been, and I tell him that when we're both at seminars, so I'm not talking behind Chuck's back, a great mentor of mine along with Al. He literally wrote the book on severe convective storms. And a lot of that understanding came not only from the theoretical and academic side, but from the right brain, from the intuitive, the experiential, the immersive side that you can get only from observing storms firsthand. He was a great mentor. In fact, at the lower middle part of this picture here, this is Matt Biddle, a great storm chaser in his own right at Matt's PhD thing where Matt earned his PhD. Chuck has been a mentor to many, many students, Matt, me, countless many others, and has also contributed slides and video and insights to storm spotter training. And him and Al worked on that in the 1980s, developing the Storm Spotter slide series. Numerous papers. He also does a gig every year for Tempest Tours, a lecture tour for them. Insights that he has conveyed on supercell structure. You might recognize the classic Lemon and Doswell 79 diagram. Primitive for what we know now, but for then it was absolutely groundbreaking. And more of the sort of artistic pseudo three-dimensional plots that evolved from that. That's from that same paper that I was telling you about that Al and Chuck and Mike and Gary were involved with. Howie Bluestein, another amazing example of a researcher and storm chaser. The science of storm chasing, in many ways, has moved through Howie for the last 30 to 40 years at OU. Was involved along with Al Bedard in the original Toto deployments before they moved to the lab. Wrote the book on storms in Tornado Alley. It's a good book. I recommend it for sure. And you can see he's been heavily involved with the development of portable and mobile radars. This was a portable radar that was deployed back in 1991 on a tornado in northern Oklahoma. I think this was the Oh What a Classic, if you've ever seen that video. He was also a mentor of mine in college. I was a student of his. More mobile radar work. In order to be able to understand storms, I like to think of it geologically. We heard Tim talk about geology, the similarities of storms and storm chasing. In order to understand the rocks, geologists say you have to go out and look at the rocks. Well, I believe that in order to understand storms, atmospheric scientists should go out and look at the storms in order to fully understand them. And that's what the mobile radar people are doing. And you can see the scans. In fact, here's a scan from El Reno, May 2013, tragic day. This is the main tornado when it was near El Reno Airport. This is a satellite tornado. This is the reflectivity presentation. There's the rho HV velocity presentation here. So you can see the two couplets. And there's a ZDR presentation there too. Tremendous amount of understanding of storm and tornado behavior has come from efforts like this. Howie's been involved with them, as have Josh Werman, Karen Kosiba, who are pictured here. Their mobile radars, and there are others besides theirs. Josh got his start at OU with this as well with the Dows, and he's at CSWR in Boulder now, along with Karen and others. And to this day, they're still studying supercell and tornado behavior by means of mobile radar. And Tim has been involved in some of those projects as well. And tremendous contributions to the science by actually going out and observing the storms. So I'll switch gears a little bit, go into operational meteorology, forecasting. I guarantee you that you're not going to find a forecaster who is more active, who is more into storms than this one. Now, I'm a little bit biased because he's also my best friend. But Rich Thompson understands storms. He understands the science. He understands these things because of that wonderful mutual feedback that occurs from going out and observing the storms firsthand, and then, in turn, being able to recognize things that are happening on radar, on satellite, and conceptualize that much better than if he had ever sat in front of a screen for his whole career. Tremendous contributions to what we do. I mean, I was involved with him on this STP and SCP research. That's over, 85 publications now on his publications list, formal and informal. Rich is a tremendous positive example to follow. He's mentored many students as well in terms of someone who not only chases actively, but contributes to the science as well, directly and indirectly. Here's a bunch of others. I mean, there are a lot of positive contributors to the science. I could go on for hours. You don't want me to. I apologize to the people that I don't have here and haven't mentioned here because there are so many great ones. But I'll point out these names. This is Robin Tanamachi, has chased with mobile radar units. And not all of these are meteorologists, although she is, and a great one. Eric Rasmussen, another scientific mentor of mine, helped found EJSSM, has been contributing to storms ever since the infamous 1981 tornado overhead chase from the old sound chase days. He's still involved with scientific field projects. Some of you may know Herb Stein. Went to school with Herb, helped out with field projects as well. He also helped to install a lot of Oklahoma mesonet stations along with Rich. Again, indirect contributions that you may not have heard about. Another great mentor of mine, Don Burgess, one of the most well-known and respected radar meteorologists for good reason, still chases. A lot of the insights that he has gained and used in his radar studies have come from chasing. Lou Wicker, you saw him in the Nova Special yelling and screaming back in 1984, and he's still at it today, doing research into severe storms, and great research indeed. But non-meteorologists too, like Sam Barraclough down in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, who's contributed so much to storm spotter education and understanding and logistics through his activities of going out and observing storms. Down in the lower left, Paul Markowski and Yvette Richardson, who are at Penn State now, they were at OU when they were getting their degrees, have been chasing for a long, long time and doing a lot of things with mobile radar, vortex, sub-vortex, things like that. Now, this guy seems to have, this guy here is, you might be familiar with, Mr. Marshall. I love radar. Yeah. Tim has contributed so much to storm chasing understanding, whether it was the Storm Chase Manual from back in the 80s, whether it was storm track involvement, collecting, disseminating information, the storm chase accounts. Obviously, I cannot even begin to touch the surface of Tim's contributions in terms of wind engineering and understanding of building failures and things like that. The man at lower right, a lot of you knew, Jim Leonard, here pictured with holding my daughter when she was about 5 or 4. My son is standing at lower left. This is actually in Tim's house. This is at one of the Storm Chaser gatherings back then. Jim was not a meteorologist, but he was obviously extremely passionate about storms, and he contributed imagery and videos without making a big fuss to weather service offices, to me, to storm spotter training efforts, freely and actively. And that was part of his passion for storms. So you don't have to be a degreed meteorologist to make these contributions. It's not about your title or whether you have a PhD before your name or a PE or anything like that. It is about your abilities, your willingness, and your ethic to give back. And I will say, Jim was born the same year as Al. He died the same year as Al, way, way too soon. And may we never forget the contributions that they have made to what we do and can do today. I'll highlight more folks here. The El Reno Survey Project gave us a great, great understanding of the behavior of one of the most tragic and bizarre tornadic events of all time. You can go online right now, elrenosurvey.net. Elka, my beautiful bride back there, who's pictured at lower right, helped design that web page. She has designed web pages for several meteorologists and several field projects. And she is the layout editor and webmaster for EJSSM and has contributed heavily to the science behind the scenes without being a degreed meteorologist or a degreed engineer. Anton Simon headed up the El Reno 2013 survey project. Tracy Simon to the right. John Allen, who's a great researcher in his own right there. Dave Hoadley, we're all familiar with, has done so much for storm chasing understanding over the years. Cannot be overstated. Skip Talbot was a tremendous contributor as well in a technical sense. It's a great website. You should visit this. They used a novel technique whereby lightning flashes across videos were timed together to sync the videos together with known times on radar. And those things are available on that site. And they published a paper in the Bulletin of AMS on that whole project. What else have chasers given to science? Well, I'd like to certainly acknowledge those chasers who have contributed information to a study that I hope to do formally here in the next few years on satellite tornadoes. This is a partial list. There's actually been a few more since I got this and highlighted it, but these chasers have contributed heavily. Images, video, storm chase accounts. Storm data does not contain all the tornadoes that exist. Far from it. It's especially awful with documentation of satellite tornadoes. And that's where I've depended heavily on chasers to send me information on satellite tornadoes that they have seen. If you're interested in contributing that, you can email me, and I will be most grateful to accept any satellite tornadoes that you may have seen in terms of the time, location, start time, stop time, things like that are not already documented. In this case, you can see a few of the chasers' images. One of them is mine here. One of them is Jason Jordan, works at the Lubbock office. That's from a video frame Rich Thompson shot from May 3rd, 99 at Chickasha. There's one that Ben Holcomb contributed. Joel Ganung and Steve Bluford contributed. Barry News out in near Union County, New Mexico. All these people have been great contributors to the science, and not all of them are degreed meteorologists. I mentioned EJSSM. It's an electronic journal for severe storms meteorology. A small journal, publishes just a few papers a year, quality over quantity. But the reason that I put this up here is to highlight positive contributions from people who are storm chasers. John Davies, you'll be sitting in, some of you on his forecast course tomorrow. He is the only author of a paper on the meteorology of the Joplin tornado, which he observed, and his photographs appear in that paper. The other paper, Aaron Kennedy, Eric, Jerry Straka, June 6, 2005, Descending Reflectivity Core on a Supercell. Quasi-theoretical and observational paper there. These are all storm chasers here writing these papers or reviewing them. Markowski, Mario, Yvette Richardson, Jim Marquis, Josh Werman on Doppler on wheel stuff. The Tulia tornado, Scott, Derek, Albert Patrica, and they wrote that about an intercept, a very unfortunate one, that Eric Nguyen and Amos Magliocco intercepted in Tulia, Texas, with scientific grade equipment they didn't intend to. The tornado and them sort of intercepted each other. They made the best out of a bad situation and published on that. The latest paper in EJSSM, Susie Beveridge, Jana Hauser, Sarah Marzola. Jana chased with OU for a long time. Their paper takes a statistical examination of the concept of tail end Charlie, which you've all heard of. and says, how valid is it? Well, read the paper and find out for yourself, and you'll see the answer. I'll get back to the Thule intercept, world record 194 millibar pressure drop. And I'll again emphasize they had scientific grade instruments on their personal chase vehicle. One of the reviewers was Eric. Great theoretician, meteorologist, and observer of storms. Another of the reviewers was Paul Markowski, likewise. The third reviewer of that paper, you may recognize the name, Tim Samaras. We have open review at EJSSM, so this is all on the public record. Tim reviewed a paper that took his record off the books. But the reason I asked Tim to review that paper is because I knew that Tim was a man of integrity who would not let his ego get in the way, who would review the paper fairly, and who had the understanding of instrumentation and engineering that it took to properly evaluate that side of what happened there. It was a great review, and the paper is much better off for it. I cannot do justice to the notion of science in storm chasing without mentioning Tim. Obviously, he was a co-founder and organizer of this convention over the years. I had a great deal of professional and personal respect for Tim. This is us after we chased the Hill City storm back in the mid-2000s, celebrating our fortunes. This is Carl Young, Carson Peter. This is my beautiful bride Elka. This is me, totally exhausted, looking like crap. There's Tim, there's John, Chuck, David Fogel, Keith Brown. Not all meteorologists, all great storm chasers, all great contributors to the science in their own ways. If you want to understand the inside story about how a non-degreed engineer and non-meteorologist can contribute greatly to storm chasing and storm chase understanding, despite some of the barriers that were put in front of him scientifically and professionally, read this book. It's a good one. Brantley Hargrove's book on Tim Samaras. It's a very respectful, chronological, and excellent treatment of Tim and his accomplishments and his legacy. If you haven't read the book, I highly recommend it. I'm circling here the folks who are degreed meteorologists, and to show you that all these folks are contributors to the science, but not all of them necessarily had a piece of paper attached to their name. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Similar to what I put up earlier, I don't expect you to read all this. Instead, the yellow is Tim's initials, his name, Tim Samaras. These are the papers that he either wrote or co-wrote based on the work that he did with his various deployments and storm intercept activities for National Geographic and on his own. Tim was not a degreed engineer or meteorologist, but contributed tremendously to our understanding of supercells and tornadoes. It can be done, and his life is a shining example of overcoming some adversities and some barriers that were put in his way in order to be able to do that. And I want to pay tribute to that with this slide. But it's not just supercells and tornadoes, it's understanding of hail. The photo at upper left in the paper is Nancy Knight up in Colorado. She's not with us anymore. But Charles and Nancy Knight have contributed tremendously to understanding of hail. They used to drive out quite often and collect hail samples, put down hail pads, do what we now know as storm chasing in Colorado to better understand the behavior of large hail. There are papers in EJSSM and many journals about the topic. Scott Blair, who now works at the Kansas City NWS office, has been and is also an associate editor for our journal, has been really good with that, has his own field program that he manages for that to collect hailstones. Don't want to leave out Tanya Brown and Ian Giammanco, who work for IBHS. You can see they test hail. They also have impact disdrometers, which are great at measuring the size of the hail through the kinetic energy that's transferred into them. That's a really amazing technology. All of them are chasers. Not all of them are degreed meteorologists. Winds, convective winds. This is probably the least contributory part, but it's also the aspect we understand the least, and it's probably the most subjective. This is a paper that I just published last year along with John Allen and Greg Carbon, both of whom are chasers, in the Journal of Climate and Applied Meteorology. And the contributions to understanding wind data from storm chasers are teased out in this paper. For example, in this graphic, we see wind reports, and these are estimated and measured wind reports, and I put the graphic of measured winds up here. Storm chasers tend to skew a little bit high on the speeds of measured winds. And I'll say this is a logarithmic scale because as you get toward the lower end of the wind values, you tend to get more and more reports in a logarithmic relationship. But storm chasers tend to report a disproportionate number here in blue versus the overall wind data in red of high winds. Well, that's obvious. We tend to get into more of these high winds and measure more of them. And these are winds that have been reported convectively to the NWS. The public also skews high. Now, how much of that is because of poorly calibrated, unscientific instruments? I don't know. How much of it is because of misfiling of measured winds as estimated or vice versa? Hard to say. Obviously, ASOS, mesonets, you expect to be well calibrated with wind reports at large, and they are. But it was an interesting finding from our study that we teased out of that. And John Allen did most of the work on this graph. So what is science given to chasers? Again, something I could go on for hours, but here's some samples. That operational recognition paper, I cannot overstate how important that was. This paper, seminal paper. You may never have read it. I guarantee you understand some of the material from it if you chase or you've been exposed to it. Photographs, Helicity, and Supercells by John Davies. John has done so much for educating storm chasers, and he will tomorrow. I highly recommend it. Very, very insightful, giving back. Supercell type forecasting. There's a lot of stuff in the Storm Track library. Rich was the main author on that one. There's a bunch of other great resources there that are still viable even if they're 20 years old. Changing direction a bit, educating storm chasers. Paul Servatka out at College of DuPage started at least what I know to be the first storm chasing course at a college. To take students out into the laboratory that is the atmosphere on storm chases and educate them on storm behavior, to basically be those field meteorologists and field geologists. A lot of colleges do this now. He got it started. And it was an amazing idea, and so many meteorology students and other students have gone through that course and come out with a much better appreciation for severe weather and a much better understanding of it. And Paul's passion for storms and passion for chasing is what led to that. Switching onward, what else is science given to chasers? Well, obviously the websites, where we get our data. What kind of data do we get? It started with Gilbert's Storm Chaser homepage and Storm Machine, which he earned also a Meat Wagon Award for back in the 1990s. But your ability to chase successfully is because of the scientific advancements that were made by, in turn, storm chasers who came before you, and so on and so on and so on. Lesser whirls lead to viscosity, I guess. But tools like this, SharpPy, the Python version of InSharp, which we use operationally at SPC, you can download this on your PC and run soundings on it and take a look at them. It's a great tool. John Hart, Jim Whistler, Rich Thompson, and others, Mike Kay, I think, as well, have worked on this program. Obviously, mesoanalysis plots. What chaser doesn't use these from time to time? I feel very honored to have been involved in the creation of some of this, especially SCP and STP with Rich. Radar, onboard radar. Who would have thought back in the 1980s or 1990s, Tim is chased back then, he remembers those days, so does some of you, Roger and others, that we could pull out something that looks like this and have nearly all the information that we might need to conduct a successful storm chase. This has spoiled a lot of folks. It also can create some dangers in terms of the Dunning-Kruger effect. Who has heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect? It's a psychological thing whereby you tend to think that you're more of an expert than you are because you have this information at hand, or because you think you have these insights. You see that? Oh, well, I've still got a couple of minutes left. I can no, there's a lag time, and that thing might be right on top of you. I think in some ways this technology, while it's benefited us and allowed us to have bigger success rates in finding tornadoes, has also been a double-edged sword in that it makes us think that we're better than we are. It gives us more confidence than we should have. It makes us overconfident, and that applies to me too. It's not just the non-meteorologists, it's all of us. And there are times that we can get caught thinking that we're pushing the envelope, and it can come back to bite us. Fortunately, on this day, it didn't. This was May 24th. This is that same 2011 event that I told you about. This was the location where the satellite tornado and main tornado merged, became a huge wedge, moved to the east-northeast. That box is my location at the time of this shot of that monster with another satellite tornado that was buzzing around it. I didn't have onboard radar with me at the time. Other chasers did. We dropped down from Kingfisher and just got ahead of the storm and waited for it to come at us. But that's what the signature looked like. If you see something that looks like that and it's moving toward you, it's probably not best to stay in that position. That was moving toward us. We didn't stay in that position. We got out of the way. Similar story on May 9th of 2016, a day that Tim is familiar with, down near Sulphur, Oklahoma. You'll see a photo from that later. You got to get out of the way of these things and don't be overconfident looking at radar. That was a tangent. Again, your ability to do it successfully. Convection allowing models, great tool. Really neat to see the possibilities in these cams that could happen later today on this chase day. If you take them too literally, you might sit out there and fry yourself and give yourself a sunburn wondering where's this model thunderstorm that was supposed to go up in the southwestern corner of Lot 4, Block 3 in Ochiltree County in the Texas Panhandle. Well, it's actually up there near Kismet, Kansas. These are great tools, but I want to warn everyone, accuracy is not the same as precision. These are very precise, but they may not be very accurate. You may get an updraft helicity field that's forecast to form out here and move this way. What if it doesn't? Again, understanding is still important. If you live by the model, you die by the model, you bust by the model, well, that's your fault. You didn't understand enough about the situation. Obviously, this is April 27th of 2011. There was a lot of vorticity in the atmosphere on that day. But these tools are all out there for you, and you have to be able to use them and use them well. In some ways, science has given chasers information overload. What you do with it is what matters. This is a somewhat controversial statement, but I believe, and this is my opinion, I'm not speaking for anybody, we owe it to the science to give back. It doesn't have to be writing formal papers. It doesn't have to be direct involvement in the science. It can be whatever your expertise level is. Perhaps giving back is what Jason did in Joplin. Perhaps giving back is calling in reports via Spotter Network. Great tool. I'm on Spotter Network, but I don't use it much because I have direct contact stuff with all the weather offices. Perhaps it can be scientific grade instrumentation. If you're going to instrument your vehicle and you're going to play like you're a scientist, why not instrument it to scientific grade specs, mount these things above the slipstream, record the data instead of having no wires or wires that go nowhere, and provide it or publish it in some way. But that's not the only way. Skywarn, storm spotting. Chasers can be spotters. If you have ham radio, use it, please. Participation in field projects is possible. It is possible to volunteer to do that. Tim has, others have. I know I don't know if Tony is anywhere. Tony, are you in this room? Lawback, are you here? Nope. Tony, of course, participated with Tim in the TwistX project for many years. Participation in field projects is a great way to give back when the opportunity arises, or simply just alerting your forecast office to the presence of something potentially severe, or actually severe in this case on Twitter. I just use this example because I don't have to ask myself permission to use my own photo. This is from Prospect Valley, Colorado, the only tornado of any consequence I saw this past year. And there were a couple of distant rain wrap pieces of junk, but that was the only one that was really worth saying anything about. But if you're going to do this, the location, the time, tag it, in this case, COWX, and the forecast office in whose domain that it's occurring. They monitor these things. There are social media people at all weather forecast offices right now during severe weather situations monitoring these feeds, different from the warning forecasters. Now, they may be busy. They may not respond, similar to what you heard from the troopers for 911. But the information is going to get there. And I guarantee you that NWS forecasters are grateful to get that information, whether it's through Spotter Network or whether it's through Twitter or any other medium that can be monitored. Live streaming. If you have the capability to do it and the cell network allows it, that's wonderful. It gives not only local forecasters and media forecasters, but even sometimes when we have a chance to pop on and check it out, those of us at work where I work, a chance to see how storms are behaving in real time out there in the field. If you have the capability and the technological know-how to do it and do it successfully and safely, that's the most important part, I'm all for that. I've watched many storm chase feeds, live stream feeds, while at work to gain insight on how storms are behaving. It's a good tool. I'm glad it exists. How you pay it forward is through the example you set. And so I'm not going to tell you what to do or exactly how to do it. I'm just going to give you some food for thought. Set a good example for what you do out there, whether it's in terms of how you behave. Don't do things that cause the guys that were up here before to pull you over and throw you in jail. Lead by example. So now, we'll just go to the bonus stuff. I only have time for a few bonus pictures here, and it's blown out on this screen, but on my side it's not. A left mover on the Cheyenne Ridge in Colorado. What is a Biennale? It's a nationally juried photo exhibit at the National Weather Center that runs every 2 to 3 years. There will be one again next year. It's skipping this year. I know a few of you have contributed, but if you're a storm photographer and you've got some great stuff that was shot within the last 2 years before the Biennale, contribute to this. It's a really neat effort, and you might actually win some prize money in the juried photo exhibit. I've had several exhibited, including this one, Lightning on Cheyenne Ridge. This one. This was sulfur. This house got hit. We were here. Needless to say, we had to get out of the way of this thing. Wide angle view, violent tornado. This is about the time Tim was northeast of it on 177. But it's sort of a view that I always envisioned would be a dream shot for Al Mohler. Wildflowers, beautiful fields, bad mother tornado. Quite the contrast in themes there. Arcadia, supercell. This was the one good shot I was able to get out and shoot in between the continuous barrage of CGs from the anvil that was occurring all around us about every 30 seconds. That's another Biennale entry that made it. I chase not just for tornadoes, of course, because they're so rare for me, but for things like this. If this was all I ever saw chasing, I'd chase it every time. This was absolutely mesmerizing. In fact, you might have had to wipe the drool up off the floorboard of my car because I couldn't get out of the car because of all the stinking CGs. even after the chase, the sunsets, the experiences. This was after a chase near Corsicana, where while I'm sitting on the can at the restaurant in Corsicana, I realized, you know what, the chase is over, the sun hasn't set yet, and the back side of this cloud shield is going to time out to Dallas right about at sunset. So I go outside, I go back out to the table we were eating at, and I tell Rich, who was chasing with that day, why don't we go to the Sylvan Avenue Bridge over the Trinity River and shoot back downtown at sunset? And Rich looked at me like I had officially gone insane. But we did it, and we got some amazing, amazing scenes from that over my hometown. Chasing is a great thing. It gives us a lot. And I think that if we give back, it'll be a mutually beneficial, symbiotic thing for everybody. Thank you very much. Thanks for putting up with me. This is the address, the web address for EJSSM. You can access some of the papers I told you about. This is my personal email address. You can contact me, SkyPixWeather on Twitter, at SkyPixWeather. Facebook is a personal page. I don't accept requests from people who I don't know or who don't come highly recommended. But you can contact me these ways. This is my photo website that Elka set up. It's great, not because of me, but because of her. And there's over 1,000 photo and story pages on that site, so you could probably waste hours browsing it, but you can also do good searches too. So if you're interested in just a ton of storm chase photos and others, since 1985, they're there. So thank you again, and I guess if there's time for questions, I'll be glad to entertain them. Roger, is there time? Good deal. Any questions about science and chasing? Chasing? Science? Yes?
How do you go about submitting photos to the biennial?
The NWC Biennale has a homepage, and they'll put an announcement up on that. So if you Google up NWC Biennale, I know Mitch, he's got some photos here. He's submitted to that before and won money doing it, rightfully so. He's got great stuff. But yeah, NWC Biennale, and that's the, Google that up, you'll find the web address, and then they'll have announcements probably in the next few months about when they're going to have their submission stuff for next year going. Good question. Yeah. Okay, the question was, are there any specific places people can submit their data to if they've got scientific-grade instruments on their vehicles? There's not a central repository for that yet, although what I recommend is if you have such data and you know of other researchers who are out chasing that day, such as people with the Rivors Project or Vortex 2 or whatever you were doing, if you were on some of the same storms they were on, you probably were not in the exact same places. They would love to have that data in order to integrate it into all the other data they have, as long as it's scientifically calibrated instruments above the slipstream with good data, because that adds another data point to the understanding and modeling of supercells. So I would just say be on the lookout and aware for opportunities to offer the data. For example, if you hear, okay, a Taurus was out on this same supercell I was on, hey, I've got some data from this thing. Contact the people who are involved with that. It's opportunistic, and I think that's what probably 90% of what I showed you is opportunistic, taking advantage of opportunities as they fall into your lap. But please do when they do. Yes?
So you found a way to merge weather art and weather science. Was there an early experience when you were growing up that drew you to this direction?
The question was there an experience when I was growing up that drew me to the direction of merging weather art and science? And I guess the best answer to that question is yes, but I don't remember it. When I was a baby, My mom loved to tell the story. When I was a baby, I would crawl to the screen door to watch the lightning. And I would stand there, or in this case, crawl and just hunch over there, absolutely mesmerized by what I was seeing. And when I was 3, my parents got a reel-to-reel tape recorder from somewhere. They couldn't afford to buy one, and my dad found it somewhere, and got a microphone out and did an interview of me and asked me, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" And I still remember they played this for me when I was about 10, and then we lost the equipment. And I said, "I want to be in a hurricane." I saw the Dallas tornado on May 26, 1976. Tim's familiar with that case. Saw it from my front yard briefly in between houses. I lived in East Dallas at the time. But I was already in love with them by then, science fair projects every year. In fact, they made me quit doing tornadoes in 5th grade after I'd done them in 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. And so I did hurricanes. So blending artistry with science, if there was a moment that really did it for me, it was that Wichita Falls picture by Leon Houghton. The next day in the Dallas Times-Herald, that photo appeared on the front page of the paper, across the entire front page. I stared at it, I kid you not, for over an hour. Just, and I knew right then and there that violent weather could not only be a field of study, which I already aspired to, but an art form. And again, it sucks that it took a tragic event like that because of how many people were killed in there. But the tornado itself, as you saw from that spotter's guide photo, was just captivating. This high contrast, mile-wide plus wedge from a storm that was fairly high base for having a tornado that violent. And I saw that and I just thought, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to see. I want to get that someday, somehow, some way, and nothing's going to stop me from doing it. And I already loved tornadoes from earliest childhood. That was the cementing factor, was Leon Houghton's Wichita Falls tornado photo. Thanks for the question. I could go on for hours. Probably ought to shut up. Any others? The question was, is it worth turning in chaser photos and videos for National Weather Service? I will say that spotter training constantly across the Weather Service wants to recycle new material and not just use the same old stuff. You're not going to see most of Al Mohler's pictures using spotter training anymore, and some of that's pretty unfortunate. But it is good to have these videos, especially in certain local areas for situations that are more common to those areas, such as rain-wrapped stuff in Kentucky and West Virginia, or high plains tornadoes for Colorado. So yes, absolutely. The warning coordination meteorologist at your local weather service office would be the person to contact in terms of contributing photos and video to their Storm Spotter training series. And all the good WCMs I know, and that's just about all of them, would be more than eager to accept that material for that purpose. So please do. It's a great opportunity to contribute. Good question. Any other questions? All right, well, I'll hand it back over to the other Roger here. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Roger. We appreciate it. And of course, wait till springtime and Roger writes the forecast for the day 1 and day 2 outlooks. It's so meticulous, so detailed. It's amazing. One of the best ones down there. Thank you, Roger. I tell you what, we are going to break for dinner, but before we do, just to let you know, at dinner they're going to take a couple of the tables out in the far back row there, and they're going to set plates at every seat and all the rest of the tables. And I ask you to please, we have to fill up every seat at every table. So when we leave here now, please take all your belongings with you, because they're going to tear all the tablecloths off and reset everything and all that. And then we'll see you back here at the door back here at 6 o'clock. You're welcome to hang out back by the vendor area till 5, and then we're going to have to run everybody out while they get everything all set up.
morning show, so I've been keeping an eye on it, and I thought right now might be a good time.
It's a juggling act, that's for sure.
Do you know if Mike's doing the video?
Yeah, he is.
Oh, he is?
Yeah, I talked to Brett, and he says he's got a good video of full chase, like in front of his vehicle. So, yeah, that one's mine. Were you able to, yeah, were you able to copy it over? Or?
Yeah, let me get this one.
Yeah, no rush, no worries. Thank you. Oh yeah.
I just leave it. I don't know if I wasn't sure how you guys were doing it. So it said to keep it labeled, so I was like, okay.
What's that?
Oh yeah, I wasn't sure if you were looking at it.
No, I was reading the name
Oh,
on
it's
it.
my, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, it's,
I think mine says Texas. I didn't know you could get them in different states. Yeah.
Man, I used to have one of those Monster.
Oh yeah.
One of those, yeah, and it said Texas on there.
Yeah, I think mine's Texas.
Got the airport, and I was like,
Oh, they're in every airport.
yeah,
Yeah,
I got
Will
it at the
Rogers
airport. That was sweet, man.
is littered with tornado everything.
A friend gave me that as a birthday present yesterday.
That's sweet. Hey, thanks, brother.
Yeah, no
Appreciate it,
problem.
man.
Well, that's a very thoughtful gift.
Yeah, that was cool.
here's a calendar. Oh, you dropped these.
Well, I gave you 5 for door prizes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. I don't know if they called my. Oh, yeah, even that. I knew I went to the bathroom and I thought.
Sorry, what's your name?
Yeah, so just Brian J. Spencer. Brian, letter J, then Spencer, yeah. Yeah, so it's lead driver for Cloud9 Tours. We have my camera's mounted right to the dash, so there's some great videos there, yeah.
Hey, maybe show mine early on. 'Cause mine's
Oh, sorry, what was the question?
Which file?
Yeah, the one up.
Mine's
Yeah.
clearly.
Do you have a lifetime?
Oh, no, sorry, the one above that, Chasercon. Yeah, that's right, that was another presentation I did a couple weeks ago. Thank you. I forgot about that.
It cleared mine. It's like, I've got a bunch of dirty picnic. A bunch of dirty photos on there. Just skip those and go to the.
Perfect. So yeah, just regular MPEG 4.
Yep, that's what I did too.
128720.
I cleared off everything. It's nothing. It just says my name and then.
You made it easy.
I made it really, really simple. I work in IT, so I was like, I don't.
Thank you.
So I'm like, I'm going to label everything. I'm going to remove every other file, so it's very simple.
I'm going to go for a quick nap.
That's actually exactly what I'm going to do too. I'm going to go. I was
Even 45 minutes.
going to charge my phone, recharge myself.
Have a quick
Oh,
beer
that's
and
good.
dinner.
Sweet. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, what is your name?
James.
James. Brian. Actually, James is my middle name, so easy to remember. Thanks for all your hard work today.
Hey, yeah, no problem.